Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is part 3 of the Salat series, centered around the concept of Zakat. In part 1 of this series, we explained the intent, the tools and analysis approach used for the study. In part 2, we went over the traditional understanding of Salat and Zakat. Based on our observations of Ruku in Quran, we noted that the probable connotations for Ruku are accepting one's weakness or error, humbling oneself to authority, changing state, course, and direction. Please note that we are building on these observations and concepts as we proceed in this series. Please watch this series in sequence for a better understanding. This series is a study of some key concepts, namely Salat, Zakat, Ruku, Sujood. Today we will primarily look at the concept of Zakat in Quran. This choice may seem odd as we are going from Ruku to Zakat. However, the reason for this choice will become clear as we proceed in this series. We will start with a few investigation points to keep in mind as we go through this part and the whole series. In Quran, is zakat prescribed as mandatory charity for the needy? Is zakat prescribed as 2.5% of wealth? Who receives the zakat? What's the relation between salat and zakat? And does zakat indicate a mental, spiritual, metaphorical state or action? Please note that we may not have concrete answers to all these questions today. Our understanding will evolve as we go through the whole series. We will build upon observations to arrive at possible meanings and connotations. The root for zakat is zakawa. It occurs in the Quran 59 times across 56 ayahs. A total of 21 verbs, 37 nouns, and 1 adjective. There are 18 ayahs that contain the 21 verb occurrences of zakawa. We will just show 3 ayahs for now. Please note that we have the traditional translations on the left for reference. However, we will use the Arabic terms moving forward so we can arrive at the meaning naturally. In 91:9, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, successful is he who purifies it. In 22:26, Jannah or paradise is the reward for those who purify. In 83, perhaps he was seeking to purify himself or get reminded that benefits him. We will make a few observations. All 21 verb occurrences are translated as purify or cleanse. Remembrance is an action aligned with zakawa, and the objective is noted as falaha, success, and jannah, paradise. The nouns, however, are a different story. We will start our analysis with 2 ayahs that we looked at in part 2 of this series. In part 2, we noted that the sequence of traditional salat, zakat, and ruku doesn't make sense. However, we observed the use of circumstantial particle in 555, indicating that salat and zakat happen while in the state of ruku. Using Quran morphology, we note that this phrase or formula is repeated 21 times in the Quran. Aqimus salat wa atuz zakat. So there is a very strong connection between salat and zakat. We can check all 21 ayahs for this repeating phrase using the provided link in Quran morphology. We note that all 21 occurrences are translated as give or pay the prescribed alms or charity. So what happened to the verb meaning of purification? Let's check 2 of the 21 ayat. In 283, the covenant of Bani Israel is mentioned. They have to help parents, orphans, and the needy. Then they are asked to do salat and do zakat. In 2177, the Quran provides definition for al-birr. Righteousness does not consist of turning your faces towards the east and the west. Rather, it is defined as amana, faith, atal mal, giving money to relatives, orphans, needy, and then doing salat and doing zakat. Question: if zakat is mandatory charity, why is helping the needy mentioned separately before salat and zakat? If salat is 5 times per day, why is zakat once a year? When they seem to compared, aqimus salat wa atu zakat. Why should the needy have to wait a year for his nourishment? In Surah 23, the Quran tells us the attributes of mu'minun. Successful are the believers, those who do works for zakat. Fa'ilun is an active participle, which means actively and continuously engaged in. Question: if zakat is once a year, why are the believers actively and continuously engaged in works for zakat? A side note: let's take a look at two other words used in the Quran, sadaqat and nafaqat. In traditional understanding, zakat is mandatory charity 2.5% given once a year, whereas sadaqat is voluntary charity given at any time, and nafaqah is also charity or general spending. Let's look at Quran 960. Sadaqat, charities, are only for the poor, and then a list of deserving people is mentioned. The ayah ends with Faridatam min Allah, an obligation from Allah. In 2276, Quran contrasts riba with sadaqat. Question: why does the tradition use an ayah for sadaqat to determine deserving recipients for zakat? And why does the Quran mention sadaqat as mandatory? The word nafaqat is also used in the Quran with a similar list of deserving people. In 2274, the spending is mentioned as day and night, publicly and privately, a continuous activity. In Surah 58, the Quran tells believers to give sadaqah when meeting the Rasul, Messenger alayhi salam. The ayah ends with, but if you don't find the means, then Allah is forgiving. The very next ayah says, then aqimus salah wa atuz zakah. Question: if they don't find the means for voluntary sadaqah, how are they going to do the mandatory zakah? Unless atuz zakah is an overall broader concept of purification. Let's look at some more nouns for zakawah. In 1919, there is a conversation with Maryam alayhi salam, Ghulaman Zakiya, to give you the gift of a pure son. In 1874, with Musa alayhi salam, Nafsan Zakiya, pure soul. So the noun form has been translated as to do with purification and cleansing, but one could argue that this is not the same word, that is, zakat. So let's proceed to 1881. Khayram minhu zakatan, better than him in purity. In 1913, about Yahya alayhi salam, wahananam min ladunna wa zakatan, and tenderness from us and purity. So the word zakat is also translated as pure and clean. In part 2, we had observed that surprisingly, the rejectors are invited to do ruku. And when it is said to them, do ruku, they do not do ruku. Wailun yawma izin lil mukazzibin. Woe on that day to the rejectors. We find a similar theme with zakat. Quran 41:6. Wailun lil mushrikeen. And woe to the associators. Allazina la yu'tuna zakat. Those who don't do zakat. And regarding the akhirah, they are disbelievers. The very next ayah starts with Innal lazina amanu. Indeed, the believers have an uninterrupted reward. So we make several observations. From ayah 6 and 7, Zakawa is an opposing concept to Sharaka. Why? Because those who commit shirk don't do zakat. Ayah 7 and 8, Amana is an opposing concept of Kafara. So that implies that Zakawa aligns with Amana and Sharaka aligns with Kafara. However, we are faced with another question. Let's suppose for a minute that Zakat is a mandatory charity for an adult Muslim if he has accumulated enough wealth. Why is an associator, committer of shirk with Allah, His system, message, and commands being asked to do mandatory charity? Shouldn't he first cleanse, purify himself of the shirk? And he is a disbeliever, hider of truth. Shouldn't he first believe, be at peace with the truth al-haq. But there is more. Quran 9:28. Innamal mushrikuna najasun. Indeed, the associators are filthy, polluted, not their clothes, but their cores. And what should one do with filthy, polluted cores? Shouldn't they cleanse, purify them? The word najasa is used only once in the Quran. Is that not enough of a sign? A side note for myself: dogs are not najas in the Quran, shirk is. So maybe I should focus on the slightest of shirk within me as a cause for malaika not approaching me. Let's do some root analysis and correlations with other roots that look or sound similar. On the right side, we see the root ata, which carries the meaning of give, produce, bring, come, approach, or reach. There are several examples in the Quran where it's translated in these other meanings instead of give. 9:28, and approach the buyut, homes, from its abwab, doors. 27:31, and come to me as Muslim. 41:11, come willingly or unwillingly. On the left side, when we look at the root zakawa for zakat, we see the meanings of purification, increasing in yield, growth, thriving, when a seed is sown, nurtured, and when it finally bears fruits, and even attaining mental discernment or wisdom. Let's look at a very similar root, zakawa, with a zal. It carries similar meanings: becoming acute, sharp in mind, completing in knowledge, reaching full potential, fully grown, and purify. So, what is the common theme here? Increasing or purifying knowledge, wisdom, and potential. There is a saying in Arabic: wealth diminishes with spending, but knowledge increases with spending or sharing. So, a possible connotation of Atuz Zakah could be approach, reach, nurture a state of increased purity, knowledge, wisdom, or potential. We mentioned a phrase that repeats 21 times in Quran, Aqimus Salah wa Atuz Zakah. Let's look at Ayah 35:18 that changes the formula to help us understand Atuz Zakah. No burdened soul can carry the burden of another. You are to warn those who aqamus salat, do salat, waman tazakka, whoever purifies himself, he only purifies for his own good. Why? So he can reach his full potential. In 1912, O Yahya, hold on to the kitab, scripture, or knowledge firmly. And we gave him al-hukm, wisdom, discernment, in his youth, and nurturing from us, and zakat, purification to reach his full potential. Zakat is aligned with Salat, Kitab, Hikmah, Hanan, and Taqwa. There are several key ayat on zakat that we will leave for future parts in this series so we can appreciate the stunning correlation between salat, zakat, and sujood. Side note: let's come back to the charity or spending and look at three ayat that describe how much to spend or give. In 2:19, answering a question, the Quran says to spend the surplus. In 25:67, the Quran specifies the attributes of Ibadur Rahman. When they spend, they are neither wasteful nor stingy, but they establish in between. In 17:29, the Quran specifies commands of hikmah: and do not keep your hand tied to your neck, nor spread it out fully. Again, to take a middle course. The word farida, mandatory share, is used for three things in the Quran. For inheritance, Quran specifies specific portions in detail, so there is no discord between the recipients as the holder of wealth has passed away. For marriage contract, no amount is specified. The instruction is to be fair and do it according to means, because two adults can make an agreement among themselves. For charity, no amount is specified. The general instructions are the surplus, according to means, and taking a middle course. It's interesting to note that the Quran does specify 20% mandatory share for the needy from ghanima or gains. Quran 8:41. Please note that ghanima is traditionally translated as spoils of war. So why is there no ayah for the claimed 2.5% zakat? Let's summarize our observations. Sadaqat is the mandatory share in our mal and rizq for the needy. Quran does not mention a fixed 2.5%. Quran does not mention waiting a year. Quran does not mention reward multiplication in Ramadan. So give whenever we see someone in need, when we have the means. Zakat carries the broader meaning of nurturing and purification to reach one's full potential. Zakat is aligned with Salat, Zikr, Kitab, Hikmah, and nurturing. We may not arrive at the meaning of Zakat till we fully analyze Salat. We left out some key ayat on Zakat from the Quran that we will address in the next part to arrive at the essence of Salat and Zakat. Please note that the presentation in this series are just my observations in the Quran. Anything good in here is from our Rabb. Any mistakes here are mine. Thank you for listening. Salamun alaikum.